It's an absolute pleasure to launch. Oh, first of all, could I please just say thank you very much to Christine Waterson for that very beautiful music during the break. Give her a big round of applause. Absolutely beautiful. I just adore young, beautiful talent, and she's oozing with it. So thank you, Christine. A quick note about please don't any more of you go without completing the evaluation surveys. So are they on the table yet? No, Glenn's going to run them around now. Just in case any of you do need to leave earlier, we'll put those around on the table now. But don't read them while you listen to this next fabulous woman. So it's an absolute pleasure to introduce to you Eleni McIlroy from Warm Corners Consulting. And Eleni has been working with many impacted communities in various recovery planning processes and projects since the Black Summer bushfires. And like the name of her consultancy, Eleni really does have a warm and very effective community-centred approach in her work. And that's why the Erranundra Snowy community and Community Recovery Committee really like working with her so much. None of the Erranundra Snowy committee members were available to join us today, or perhaps in brackets were brave enough, which we totally understand. So, but they were very keen and excited for their project to be shared and to have a light shone on it, because it is a very exciting project. So Eleni has kindly volunteered to share with us this project on their behalf. Now, I'm not sure if I'll ask Eleni to share her screen to see her gorgeous face, but let's see if that can work easily. It's the Building Healthy, Resilient Communities Through Service Equity project. The Erranundra Snowy community identified this as a need in their community planning well before the bushfires, so they were well placed to progress that project. It already had the community consultation and endorsement. Eleni's just helped it move along and take the next steps and become a really exciting pilot. So thanks very much for joining us, Eleni, and we'll look forward to hearing about this exciting project.
All right, well, thank you so much, Eva. And thanks for that introduction, and I'm hoping everyone can hear me and everything's working.
Yes, it is. Oh,
brilliant. I'm seeing some heads nod. All right, as Eva said, my name is Eleni McIlroy. I'm director at Warm Corners Consulting, or Warm Corners Co, if you want to save time. And I've named my business after my family farm up in the Bonang area, because I started the business because I wanted to create more opportunities to live in East Gippsland. And obviously that personal connection to the Erranundra Snowy area has been a big part of why I've been selected to do the work that I've done with them over the past 4 years. But I also came back to East Gippsland from Melbourne, having worked for state and local government on some multi-million-dollar construction projects, so as well as community planning, community engagement around those projects. So I guess that's the kind of stakeholder project management skill set I brought to the project. I'm just going to share my screen. I've only got 4 slides, but just to give you some nice pictures to look at, to show you what we've done up there. All right, hopefully that's coming through. Excellent. So I'll just go back a slide. So as you can see, as with all good projects, this project had a very long name, Building Healthy and Resilient Communities Through Service Equity. And as Eva said, this project actually was originally envisaged after the 2014 fires, which also really impacted the Erranundra Snowy area. And so that was a good 8 years it had been in the pipeline. Just before the fires in 2019, council had done a major community planning process with the whole district, which I will say they don't naturally work as a district, and so bringing so many communities together that had a lot in common and were neighbours but weren't necessarily connecting the way they might have connected 50 years ago was a big challenge. But improving the access to services in that district, and particularly health services, really came out as a big issue, and it was listed as one of the top 3 priorities in that plan. After the fires, the recovery committee had this plan that had just been written, and they said, we don't think as a community we need to do a new planning process. We're going to look at our community plan, because to be honest, most of those priorities are even more important in a recovery and even an emergency state. So our inability to access services when our roads are closed, our poor internet connections, all of this stuff just really exacerbate what happens to us during and after these major events. Obviously, it's quite an isolated region. You can come across McIlroy's Bridge, or you can come down the Bonang Road. If a tree comes down, the road can be closed for long periods of time. At that point, the Bonang wasn't sealed all the way, so it could often be closed for a month or 2 in winter because it was too slippery. And then obviously going across into New South Wales, possible, but always access issues around services. So after that process of looking at the community plan and saying these are our priorities, and we know we've got documented community support for them in recovery, the CRC worked with Emergency Recovery Victoria and Council to get some funds. And really importantly, the first thing they did was actually not to ask for the full amount of money, because they didn't know what the amount of money they needed was. What they asked for is some money to figure out, we know we want to improve services in our region, particularly health services. We think we've got an idea, but we actually need to gather some evidence and do some budgeting and figure out how we can do this in an affordable way that works for our community. So that's really how this project was born. I was brought on in February 2022 to work on this project, which I'm going to just give you a quick headline summary of. It was really an innovative program focused on increasing the service equity in small and remote communities in Far East Gippsland, and that was by delivering a technology-enabled nurse-led health service hub model. So what does that mean? Well, I've got a couple of photos here, and this is what we ended up delivering after a range of community consultation. So in Goongra and Tubbut, they had schools that had closed in 2018 where there was some spare space that just needed a bit of renovation. And in Bendock, we were able to use an underutilised part of the neighbourhood house. So in these 3 locations, we retrofitted existing rooms that weren't being used to make a private consulting space. They have high-speed internet connected to them. As you can see, there's a plug-and-play desk, so anybody can come and plug into that screen. In the back, you'll see a medical table, and on the desk, if you look really hard, you'll see a box for something called a Microsoft HoloLens, which is a device that a nurse or anyone really can wear, and then the person, so say the doctor on the other end of that phone call, will see what the nurse is seeing. It's called merged reality. So we didn't land at this at the beginning. In that first stage of funding, which was $75,000, $50,000 from the Community Foundation. If they had not come to the table, this project would not have got off the ground. And then the Foundation for Rural and Regional Renewal topped up the next 25. So we brought in a university who did a whole heap of community engagement to really talk to people about what's difficult in the health space for you and how is that impacting you. And that was really important because after 8 years of trying to get this project up and running in some way and hitting constant roadblocks, it was pretty obvious to me as the project manager when I was brought on that we needed to show that there was independent data about how bad the situation was up there, that unfortunately people saying how bad it was not landing. So we got this fantastic report that really laid out all of the issues in the intricate way. And that was based on surveys, which we got a really high response rate to, but also one-on-one conversations that the university research partner did. Throughout that time while that research was happening, I was supporting it but I was mostly doing that strategic stakeholder work. So getting the community together, helping them think about how to solve some of the problems that were coming up through the engagement, figuring out a path forward, but most importantly, meeting with, connecting anybody I could think to in the health and service place to the community, to really get their buy-in into the project. And so we got a number of community project champions through that process. And so we put together a budget for what we called stage 2, and that was really to do all of this lovely work that you see in the photos, install medical equipment and office equipment at these private consulting hubs in each community. And then we put together an ambitious project for what we were going to call a pilot of the nurse-led health model, which was to actually pay a nurse for a couple of years to see how this project might work in remote communities. And as you can see, we needed about $700,000 to do that. So when you're looking at a community of 300 people over a massive area and 3 different project sites, lots of eyebrows are getting raised, basically. And we really had to fight that battle of like health and service equity. These are human rights, and we may not be able to service people very cheaply in these areas, but that doesn't mean that the government and services are off the hook. So we need to find the effective way that is cost effective, or not cost prohibitive at least, to service people. And so we put those 2 stages together in a project plan, and we really just started applying for funds, started talking to people. And so this was about 9 months into the project. In my head, I really thought, particularly with COVID in play for most of this time, obviously the pressure on the health budgets across the state were really high, so we weren't getting a lot of state buy-in. But we just kept at it. We kept working with our champions. We updated them every month about what was happening. We kept applying for grants, and we just were really focused on, well, if we can get a $20,000 grant, we'll buy the furniture. If we can get a $100,000 grant, we'll do the work. And we just really chipped away. And every time we made that grant application, we told them how it was part of a bigger picture and how much we'd achieved and how much, what our plan was for achieving the rest. So where we've landed, as I said, I was brought in February 2022. It's now March 2024. So 2 years, we've actually managed to get the project fully funded. And that happened about 9 months ago, that we got the final funding for stage 3, which was to employ the nurse. So you can see in this little diagram here, we managed to get most of the funding for the stage 2, the physical works at the wellbeing spaces, they're now called, by telling people that we had a plan to get funding for a nurse, but in the interim, they were going to be used for education, business, really multi-purpose use by the community. ConnectWell supported us to get the funding for the higher speed internet, which is working at 2 sites, and at 2 sites it's not, so we're looking at Starlink, unsurprisingly. And then mid-late last year, the community, working together with Orbost Regional Health, tendered for some money from the Gippsland Primary Health Network, and that has secured enough funding for a nurse 4 days a week and some admin support, and obviously the cost associated with nursing, so travel up there, but also health, medical supplies. And that's a 2-year pilot, which the community got some separate funding from the Community Foundation, and they're running their own evaluation of that, so that hopefully at the end of the pilot, or actually 6 months before the end, again, we've got some really good data that we can compare to all of that initial research that was done in 2022, and hopefully we'll be able to show through this project intervention how much we've shifted people. So people were travelling on average 2 hours each way to get any kind of care. 86% reported that they were delaying access to care because the cost and time impacts of travel, and a number of people reported that there'd been, in the past 5 years, multiple occasions where they'd been not sick enough to call an ambulance, but too sick to drive themselves Think of a broken ankle, gastro when you're vomiting, all these things that if you've got to drive 4 hours, return, and you don't have a lot of friends around you or your friends are busy and working, how do you get there? So, that's really about the project. It's ongoing. The community, the governance group for this project is very large. It has at least one person, usually 2 or 3 from each of the communities. We have stakeholders on the group still trying to be really collaborative and make it clear that this is about solving the problem in this area, but finding learnings that could be applied to other areas of Victoria and Australia. And I just wanted to leave you with the kind of 4 tips of how we made this project happen, really putting it in people's minds, convincing them to do it, and then funding it in 2 years is quite remarkable. And so the first tip is just always be strategic. Know what the plans around you say, the government plans, align with them. Document your project, make sure that in the outcomes that you've written that your project's going to achieve, you're really aligning with all this stuff. Break your project into parts, like we did with the 3 stages. We split the pilot and the maintenance works apart because you never find grants that will fund both. So we knew when we were writing grant applications, we'd be writing one application to a grant program that was for buildings and another one that was probably in the health sector. While they were combined and we were submitting applications for the past 8 years, they were looking and going, oh, but that's fine, but we don't fund that. So split your projects up into stages that achieve things so that you can keep progressing, but also stages that fit with the different types of funding that's out there. You can never have too many stakeholders, so just really make sure you're communicating with them always. Even if the project's quiet for 8 months, send them a message every month. Tell them what you're doing. Invite them to stuff. Remind them the power they have as a champion. Ask them to be a champion and then follow them up and say, could you talk to your groups again this month about why this project's so important? And then finally, the power of this project from a funding perspective is absolutely that it's community-led, it's designed for and by the community, really high buy-in, really local solutions to problems, but within a framework of understanding that other communities have their same problems, but they didn't have the expertise in the community all the time. So they went and got funding and brought in expertise. In this project, it was really project management. We didn't need any architecture or anything. But that the governance group really worked with me as project manager to set the strategy and the guidance, and then really empowered me to go and do the work on a day-to-day basis and put together feedback and recommendations for them how to proceed. So I won't take too much more of your time. If you are interested in the project, as I said, I can always contact you to some people in the community who can talk about it more. You could come up for a visit sometime if you wanted to, when the nurse who's been hired and in the role for about 3 months is in the wellbeing space. But you can also reach out to me, and that's just my email on the screen there, and I could share some project documentation as well that we put together to show you what kind of stuff we're taking to stakeholders to get their support.
Wow. Quickly grab down Eleni's details, and then can you stop sharing, Eleni, so we can see your beautiful face again? Nurses in remote areas wearing HoloLenses so that doctors can see and hear the issue and support well-being. Far out. What an amazing project. Yeah, another round of applause. It's really incredible. I feel like this one is one that other communities are going to want to pick up, and of course they'll tweak it and shape it and make it work for their community. But what an amazing job the Erranundra to Snowy community have done to work 8 years. 8 years towards something that they know is important for their community. So there's patience and resilience and passion and with some really fabulous support from you, Eleni. Thank you. That was wonderful. We've probably got time for if there's a burning question before Eleni jumps off. If there is a burning question, from anyone in the room. We've probably got time for one or two quick questions. Everybody's just had lunch, Eleni. You know what it's like. Nothing? Okay, I saw them all scribbling down your email address though, Eleni. Now, Eleni, I did hear that you are leaving us. You've gone to live elsewhere. Are you still doing work in East Gippsland?
Yeah, I am. So for the past 2 years, have been doing a week a month in Canberra, and I've just switched that. So now I'm doing a week a month back in Orbost in East Gippsland. I still very much do think of myself as an East Gippslander, but, and I'm sure people in the room are feeling this today, and I know businesses like mine are feeling it. The kind of work I do, there was a lot of money around after the fires for projects, but obviously if my business is going to continue, I need to be picking up some work outside of East Gippsland, because on a business as usual time frame, there just isn't enough work in East Gippsland to go around, but I love it. I love the remote communities, the regional communities. I do feel that I have like a natural affinity because I grew up between Canberra and Cabanandra, near Bonang. And so for me, it's just a real pleasure to be working with communities that I feel like I really understand and know, to solve problems, but to come up with the solutions themselves. And I'll never get that kind of work elsewhere. Like East Gippsland the communities are beautiful and unique that way. So it's see you less often, not see you never again.
Oh, great. Well, I'm really pleased to hear that. I was a bit sad because all I heard was, no, she's moved to Canberra. And I was very sad to hear that. So I'm very glad you've still got a tippy toe in East Gippsland and that we can call on you. So please, another round of warm applause for Eleni, and thank you for sharing that exciting project. Please pass on to the Errinundra Tisnoe CRC and community how freaking impressed we are with that project. It's really amazing. Thanks, Eleni.
Bye.
Oh, wow. I think there's a few communities going to be very interested in a project like that.